Welcome everyone to another edition to As Above, So Below Radio. I'm your host, Martin Hodgson, and it gives me great pleasure to have you tuning in today. When you get a chance, please visit the newly revamped website holisticadvocate.com. For any updates on news as well as interviews, please visit my blog. Also, take a moment to subscribe and become a member. Not only will you gain access to the commercial-free, subscriber-based interviews, but also treat yourself to an assortment of fascinating people worth listening to. Today's guest is Don Gifford. Don is a co-principal of a company that is based in Colorado called Blue Water Alchemy, which sells ORMUS. Having realized that he had been also born with the ability to see visions of probable future realities, Don candidly shares his insights on the promising world awaiting humanity. Join me in welcoming Don as he discusses ORMUS and his visions of the future. First of all, Don, I want to extend to you a warm welcome for being on As Above, So Below Radio. Now, before I begin, Don, I want to mention here to the audience that the scope of this broadcast is to present information to educate on alternative form of healing. As always, please use your judgment and if necessary, consult a qualified healthcare practitioner if you're deciding to engage in any alternative therapy. So, that's the medical disclaimer, but I'm giving out to the listeners here. All right, now, you're a co-principal of a company called Blue Water Alchemy, right?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Now, I've listened to you in another interview with Carrie Cassidy of Project Camelot, so I'd like to ask you here, Don, what got you started on your path towards helping others heal themselves?
You mean what happened to me that brought me to ORMUS, or my whole reasoning behind it?
Pretty much both, if you can go into the story here.
Well, I came to ORMUS about 10 years ago after a very lengthy illness. In 2003, I had contracted a mosquito virus. I was tested negative for the West Nile, and the virus that I had was penned the mystery virus. I remember it was around August of 2003. I was at work, and I got bit by a mosquito, and I was like, oh my gosh, I thought maybe I was going to be okay because there had been a major outbreak of the West Nile in northern Colorado. And within weeks, I was in really good shape. I worked out all the time. So within weeks, I started to get a headache, severe neck and back pains. And at that time, my understanding was that if you were very healthy and you could touch your chin to your chest, that you would be okay. And I didn't take into mind that I was really healthy and really strong, and that enabled me to bend my head over to my chest. And so what happened is I waited a couple weeks before I even went to a doctor, and the virus had become full-blown. And I did go in, and they didn't test me yet. And they sent me to a neurologist who had been brought to Colorado by the CDC, the Center for Disease Control. It was up in Fort Collins, Colorado. And I went in to see her, and over a period of months, I got worse and worse. They put me on drugs, one called Neurontin, one called Topamax. They put me on a drug for shingles. They put me on Wellbutrin. I was on several neurological psychotropic drugs, is what they refer to them. And so I remember about 7 months into the illness, it had progressively gotten worse, and they finally agreed to do a spinal tap on me. And in the spinal tap, it verified that I did not have the West Nile virus, but I did have an airborne vector virus that came from mosquitoes. And they didn't have a name for it at that time. there is one thing that I did learn is that my neurologist would always say the same things to me over and over again. I would say, I'm really sick, but I'm not dumb. Something's going on. I'd like to know what I have. And my neurologist would say, there are several viruses that are not from here. We know how to treat them, and I cannot tell you what you have. So this was a statement that was made to me over many, many months. Every time I would go in, I would ask the same question because, you kind of want to know what you have.
Mm-hmm.
Into the virus, there was a really strange point. I remember my sister was there and a friend. I had white feathers coming out of my spine and across my shoulders and down to the base of my spine. So it was like two right triangles back to back. And I remember going into my neurologist because these little white quills, they're probably about a quarter inch, a little more in length. And they were placed perfectly down my spine and across the shoulders. I went in and I said, what is this? I have these feathers growing out of my back.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, it's an anomaly. And I said, are you blanking kidding me? This is an anomaly. I have white feathers and I can't touch them. I was, mind you, by then the virus, my myelin sheath had been pretty much destroyed throughout my body, so I was in severe pain. So you couldn't even touch me. And to even touch these little quills on the back, because I actually had wanted to pull one out at one point, was very, very painful. And so I had kind of entered into the world of the twilight zone then. I was really perplexed and questioning my own sanity at that point because I had white feathers growing out of my back. And also because of the fact my neurologist would really never tell me what I had, even though they were giving me 5 different neurological drugs. From the beginning to the end of the illness, I had actually gained about 95 pounds on all the medication. Within the first 6 weeks on Neurontin, I gained, I think it was at least 40 or 50 pounds. It was pretty extreme. And I went from being in excellent health to being bedridden. And it was a very difficult illness because of the pain aspect. And because of all the neurological drugs, my brain always felt really strange, like it was had static or electricity up there. And I would ask my neurologist every time what's going on. And in a way, in a very condescending way, she would say, well, I told you these are the side effects and this is what's going to happen. And it was just a very different world. And I felt like I was not being treated with respect, that I'd kind of become a guinea pig. And during that illness, I kept having a dream. And so the illness lasted almost a year. I kept having a dream that I was standing in a void, a room, and I was nude, and I would look above my head, and there would be a bright white light, a little pin of white light. And from that white light, this liquid would come pouring out, and I would open my mouth to it, and it would enter my body. And so I kept having this vision or dream. So if you fast forward towards the end of my illness, I was having many, many issues. I was having not just neurological, I was having respiratory. I was having issues with my heart because when I was falling asleep, I wasn't breathing. It was like a very, very severe sleep apnea, and I would have to wake up to breathe because I was forgetting to breathe for some reason. And then my heart started to have issues, and then I started having high blood pressure because my heart was trying to compensate. It was, at one point, it was beating over 200 a minute. My blood pressure, I remember, went to, 190 over 100 and something. It was like ridiculous. And when they first saw that, they were actually in a panic. And that was one reason they gave me Wellbutrin, because they said the Wellbutrin would slow things down. Mind you, by then I was already toxic from all these drugs, and I had developed like sores on my back. They said I had shingles, it was just numerous things that I was experiencing. So towards the latter part of the illness, I was bedridden. I was losing my eyesight. I could no longer open doors. I couldn't drive a car. There were just many things I couldn't do, and it was very, very painful. And I decided that I couldn't do this anymore, and that I had chosen not to stay in this body. And I came to peace, and I understood that, I don't have to be here. I don't have to do this. I can go. And I knew that when I would fall asleep, if I didn't wake up, that would be it. If I just chose to stay asleep. So I did. I was at peace with it. And I had experienced my second near-death experience at that point in my life. I did when I was 19, and then, of course, in 2000, I think it was 2004, that I had the near-death experience. And I died, and my mother came to get me. And my mother, Reiko was her name, she died over 15 years ago. And I was flying in this vehicle with her. It was like a crystal Merkaba vehicle, and she was flying away, and I could see this boundary was coming. And I understood that if I crossed this boundary, that I would not be able to return. And even though that I had chosen to leave, as I was leaving, I realized that it wasn't time, that I needed to be here. And I remember telling my mom, "Hey, Mom, stop. I need to get out." And she wouldn't acknowledge me. And I did this several times, and I was like, why isn't she acknowledging me? And I closed my eyes, and I felt there was this energy within me, an energy that we all have. And I tapped into that energy to make her stop, and she did. She stopped, and she turned and looked at me. And she said, "Hi, Donnie." I said, "Hi, Mom." I said, "I can't go." And she goes, "Well, I know you can't go." And I remember thinking, well, why didn't you stop then? And she landed her Merkaba, and I got out of it, and I told her I would see her again and that I loved her. She said, "Yes, I will see you again." And as I got out and closed the door, I could see two of my younger nieces and a great niece walking on this boundary in front of me. And I realized that they represented something in the future that I needed to be here for. And I woke up. And as I woke up, I was choking and started breathing again. And all of a sudden I felt this rush of heat coming into my body, like energy. And at that moment, I remember my younger sister came downstairs, and I told her, I just had this experience that Mom had come, and then I realized what my mother was trying to show me is that within all of us, that there is this energy that exists, and it's a life force that we all have to tap into. And as I realized that, the energy intensified from around me, and my sister, Ella is her name. She said, "We have you on all these prayer lists all around the world, and, we didn't tell you." I said, "Well, I must be open to it, to all this energy now." And I knew at that point that I was going to start getting better. And it was actually that evening, because I was bedridden, all I could really do was lay there on a sheet, nude, and I would listen to a radio show, or I was listening to a show called Coast to Coast AM, and there was a man named Barry Carter, who was the global librarian of the ORMUS movement, and he was speaking about ORMUS. And one of the first things Barry said, he referred to the ORMUS as this white liquid from heaven. And I was like, oh my gosh, I've been dreaming about this for the whole past year, and I need to listen. And after listening, I did order some ORMUS from a small company. It was, I think, up in Washington State. And I got the ORMUS. I had it overnighted. And within, I think it was 2 days, I got it. And I remember getting the package, looking at it, and I was questioning my sanity because I saw this white light coming out of this box of ORMUS.
Mm-hmm.
And I opened the box, and I saw the bottle, and I could feel this energy coming from this ORMUS. And I'm like, okay, I know I'm really sick. So either I'm hallucinating because of all these drugs they have me on, or I'm really experiencing this. Either way, I was really experiencing it. So I put it in the glass of water, and I remember stirring the water, and it's very, luminous looking, and it was glowing. And I said, what do I have to lose? I'm dying, and I'm going to try this stuff because nothing else is working. So the minute I put the ORMUS to my mouth, it touched my lower lip, and it's what I would refer to as a plasmic discharge. It shocked my body. And in that moment, it was a very euphoric, powerful feeling. It showed me a vision. And mind you, not that I believed in past lives at that time, but I was told that I had chosen to come back to the earth. And the ORMUS told me that everything that I had experienced in this lifetime had brought me to this point, to the ORMUS. And that many, many, many lifetimes ago, thousands of years ago, I made ORMUS, and that I had agreed to return to also make ORMUS on the earth,
Mm-hmm.
and that it was a tool for consciousness and to help facilitate change in this world. And it showed me a spherical vision, and it showed me that I was going to have a company. It showed me that I was going to make it affordable, and that everything was going to fall into place. And so here I am talking to you 10 years later,
Mm-hmm.
and I have Blue Water Alchemy. And Blue Water Alchemy all came from a dream. Even the name came from a dream.
What's
enormous.
That's fascinating, Don. And what strikes me as peculiar is that your doctor had told you that there were certain viruses that were not from here, from the earth, I assume, right? So they were pretty much hush-hush with regard to this virus that you had, right?
Yes. Yeah, they wouldn't tell me anything pretty much. It was always the same statement. There are several viruses that are not from here,
Mm-hmm.
which was never clarified to me.
Oh.
What I had was never clarified to me. What was clarified is they said they knew how to treat it. And I also questioned my neurologist several times, and she was in communication with the CDC at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And also during that time, they were taking my blood because they had initially tried to say that I had something called, what was it? It's iron overload, hemochromatosis.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something that my mother passed away from, and it's iron overload. So I had to sign a release to the NIH so they could watch my blood. And I was going every week for this bloodletting and giving them blood, a pint of blood a week for a while. And I basically, as far as I'm concerned, I had become a guinea pig of this virus that had been let out. But because of it, I also came to the ORMUS. Without that experience, I don't think that
Mm-hmm.
it would have happened. It was the road that I was meant to go down.
Okay.
So I could have my own healing.
Yeah, and you pretty much had your affairs in order with regard to this infection. So you pretty much knew that this was it, in other words, right?
Oh, yeah. I was, I had come to peace with that.
Mm-hmm.
I had been on medical leave for several months. I mean, I couldn't drive a car anymore.
Right.
I was having issues with my eyesight. I remember there was one point when I was at work. I worked in a warehouse for a large beer manufacturing company, and there were these panels that had these buttons with words on them telling you what to do. And I remember one day looking at them, and I could no longer see the words.
Hmm.
And my coworker came up and said, Don, what's going on? And I said, well, I can't see it. And he pointed it out to me. This was very strange for me. He pointed it out, and all of a sudden the word reappeared. And I was on the verge of insanity, I thought at that point. I just had no idea what was going on anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So my body had been taxed to its max. And I was at peace. I was at peace to leave.
Okay. Now, just to mention to the audience, the website both you and your partner Scott Stevens manage is called bluewateralchemy.com. And I know that reading the information on your website that you harvest sea salt from different parts of the world. Is that correct?
Yes, yes.
So how important is it for your company to be highly selective of the sea salt you use in selling the ORMUS, Don?
Oh, well, it's very important.
Mm-hmm.
We buy out from a real large wholesaler.
Mm-hmm.
All of our salt is the best salt that you can get.
Uh-huh.
We even have a Geiger counter, and we test our salts now because we're just concerned about the whole global issues going on with radiation also. And all of our salts are fine. We were primarily concerned about the salt from Hawaii, the Alea salt, and we do have quite a large stock of it. But we do test everything because we couldn't get any answers from anyone. No one wanted to talk about the radiation in the ocean now or in our atmosphere. So we became proactive on that. Mm-hmm. I believe I came to ORMUS through a death or a rebirth, and my integrity with the ORMUS is to get it out there as far as I can, to make the best that we can, and using all different techniques, whether it's the sacred geometry and the rodent coil with the solfeggio tones, but also the integrity of making it affordable so everyone can have it. And I really do believe in the ORMUS. I believe ORMUS is not just orbitally rearranged monoatomic elements, but that ORMUS on a spiritual level is truly a tool for helping manifest in this new realm that I see coming. I do see that there are great changes coming. And it's about getting the human body and everything to resonate at a much higher vibration and resonance. And as we do that, I believe things will change. Mm-hmm. And that is my calling with the ORMUS. I prefer to talk about ORMUS as a spiritual tool where the higher entrains the lower vibration. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, because of that, there are aspects of physical healings that can occur. But for me, it is spiritual because it came to me through my dreams in a spiritual sense or realm.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so it's my understanding, Don, that this substance helps raise the vibration of the human body. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes.
One of the features that or effects this substance affects is the pineal gland, right?
Yeah.
It speeds up your thought processes. Would it be similar to, let's say, raising the frequency level found in someone's chakra system as well?
Yes, I would say that. What I do know about ORMUS, of course, mm-hmm. Because of my personal experience, they do understand that within the first 2 weeks of consuming ORMUS, that there's a butterfly effect that happens with the brain. And so you become very centered. Your left brain, right brain start to equalize, and you become very centered in your thought process. But and that happens at about 14 days if you just keep taking it. But then after that, what they understand is the body in 1 second, the average human body carries about 10,000 messages between the cells and all the organs and your mind and your heart. But once you start to consume ORMUS, you can potentially get up to about 1 million. So it's like coming online. That's how I look at it. It's like you're coming online, your body's coming online, but also you're connecting to what we'd refer to as your ka, the light body, the higher template of yourself. And I like to talk about this aspect of ORMUS because that's the spiritual aspect where it comes in and doesn't train the body. Also, lucid dreams are a side effect of ORMUS. If people have emotional issues that they need to work through, it does empower them to work through it, but they do have to work through it. It won't allow you to retain those old thought processes. We've had many clients who have talked to us about that. Or mental issues. It works on many, many levels. It's pretty amazing what it could do.
Interesting. Okay. Now, it's my understanding, Don, that this substance can also be used for plants, correct?
Yes, we have two different ones we make. One is Gaia Harvest 1, one is Gaia Harvest 2, and both of them are from different salts. Gaia Harvest 1 we normally use for the initial stage of growth of gardens, or we have organic growers that use it. Although we are not organic certified yet, we are trying to get that right now. And then the second salt, Gaia's Harvest 2, primarily comes from volcanic salts. So it really works with budding plants or fruiting plants. And it's amazing what just an ounce to a gallon of water, what ORMUS can do for a garden. Or tomatoes don't even taste like tomatoes anymore. Or fruit trees, the fruit just starts to increase in size. So, of course, with fruit, actually, it's better to start when the tree is young. So the substructure, the trunk, and the branches are strong enough to hold this heavier fruit. It changes everything. And I believe that this is where ORMUS is going to have its largest growth, is getting it into the food chain, getting it into vegetables and fruits. So because, this is naturally what the earth has done for humans and all living beings, is it always provided ORMUS. But we have kind of created problems with the natural decay process by using chemicals, petroleum products. And when the earth, has a forest fire, it creates ash. Ash helps alkalinize the soil, and the alkalinization helps release the elements. When the alkaline reaches the water, fresh water, and it runs to elements, it helps reduce them. And if it's a higher alkalinity and it runs to the ocean, and it's the ocean, then natural ORMUS occurs. It's all about this natural process about the earth releasing these elements. And if we would allow the earth to be healthy, this would be a standard. It would be normal. And gosh, I could only imagine what it would do for all living things if the earth were in its healthier state.
Right. Well, there's a photo on your website that's taken with Scott Stevens, whom I interviewed a few weeks ago, and he's next to some tomato plants, and these have to be, my God, at least 6 feet high. That's just amazing.
Yeah, they were in one of our greenhouses that we were running tests. And they were about 7 feet tall.
Wow.
And actually, you're seeing the plants when they chose to stop watering them to see how long they would last. Unfortunately, we didn't take all of them to crop because they were covered with tomatoes.
Right.
But they actually lived for a couple months with zero water. It was just some of our tests that we were running to see how they react to ORMUS. And the one thing about tomatoes, if you grow them with ORMUS, they taste amazing. I have never had a tomato that tastes as sweet as ones grown with ORMUS.
Okay, so anyone using this substance, say in the garden, would yield an enormous bumper crop. So I guess I want to ask you here, how important is this for someone trying to, let's say, get back to nature, to be more independent and self-sufficient?
I'd say it's very important.
Mm-hmm.
They have tests showing ORMUS in gardens. It increases not only crop yield, but the health and the strength of the plant. You have less issues with bugs. It's more drought tolerant. It's more frost tolerant. It's just amazing. I mean, you can literally see, you can spray it on a garden, do a foliar spray, or you can do it through irrigation, and within a couple of days you see an immense change to the plants. But also when they look at the soil, the whole bioflora just comes full on, and mycelium, it works with the mycelium also in the soil. It works on many levels. And what I'm looking at now with what I see coming in the world, I think it's very important that we get ORMUS into the food chain, into farming, because of what it not only provides nutritionally from the plant, but the whole vibrational aspect of the higher vibration that it brings in. And because I really believe in these times we need that, so we can create solutions, but not just temporary solutions, create permanent solutions for the way we live on Earth. And I do believe that ORMUS is an aid for that.
Okay. Well, what about animals, Don? Can ORMUS be used or consumed by animals as well?
Yes, we actually have people who have used it on their horses. They rub it in the withers. We have people who give it to their cows, also on the withers or in their water. Dogs and cats, you give them much less. You give them like just a few drops on their food or in their water. It gives them tons of energy. It totally changes them. I had a dog, Chloe was her name, and she lived till she was almost 18 years old. She was a big black standard poodle, and they said, around 14 or 15 would be her maximum life. But I had kept her on the ORMUS, and I remember one day she pretty much didn't want it anymore, and that was close to when she was 17 to 18. And then she did pass shortly after I took her off of it. But it did give her a very healthy life, and give her energy that she wouldn't have had otherwise. But you do give them less, though.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, they're very sensitive to it.
Right. Okay. Well, I want to switch topics here, if you don't mind. I'd like to talk about your visions here that you've had. Now, you discovered at quite a young age that you were considered a primary delta.
Correct. I was, I think I was 20 or 21. I had just come back from overseas. I had been in Japan, and my mother sat me down in the living room and told me, she said, "Dottie, there's something I need to tell you." She said, "Do you remember when we hospitalized you in Boulder, Colorado, and they were running all those neurological tests on you when you were 14. I was between 14 and 15. I said, "Well, yeah, of course I remember it. I was in the hospital over a week." And she said, "Well, we chose not to tell you, but you are what they call a delta wave or a primary delta wave." And I remember, I said, "What are you talking about, Mom?" She said, "Well, human beings are alpha, beta, theta, and delta. And they discovered that whether you're awake or asleep, you're in delta wave at all times. So it's the brainwave pattern." And she said, "We just didn't want you to feel you were different." But truthfully, at that moment when my mom told me, I was like, gosh, I wish they would have told me, because I've always seen things since I was young, whether I was awake or asleep. I've always seen what's called sacred geometry. I've always seen beings, light beings. I've always had encounters with them since I was a child. And, of course, you're a kid, you're not going to talk about it a lot to people. But I just kind of thought that that's how it was. And but I didn't necessarily share it with everyone. And but once my mom explained, then I started to have a different understanding that that's why my dreams were so lucid. And when I dream, there are points when I'm like totally awake in my dream.
Mm-hmm.
And I do experience what's called sacred geometry, and also what some people refer to as the code. It's writings, equations, geometry, the flower of life, beings. It's always around us. It's always present. It's just that many of us are not aware of that it is an aspect of our reality that always exists, or it's actually the basis of it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why when I have dreams, I tend to listen to them.
Right, right. Okay, now I want to tie this into your experience also while being in the Air Force. You also had a near-death experience at the time, right?
When I was 19 years old, I did.
19 years old, okay. And you were shown the future, or more accurately, a probable reality, is that correct?
Yes, I was shown many things.
Uh-huh.
Things that were coming. Back then, I remember they referred to those as prophetic near-death experiences.
Mm-hmm.
I did speak about it for a little bit at one point when I was younger, and then I stopped talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
But I was 19. I was having a tonsillectomy.
Mm-hmm.
The surgeon was an older surgeon who worked for the Department of Defense. My first surgery was about 5 hours. What happened is he slipped and somehow cut into my throat, and there are brachial aspects of the artery, not the superior vena cava, what's it called? Well, the artery on the side of your neck.
Oh, the carotid artery?
The carotid, and he had actually sliced into some of these smaller veins that come off of it, and then I started to hemorrhage. And they eventually got it sewed back up. I was back in recovery. I remember feeling a lot of pressure in my throat. And I was laying there, and all of a sudden the pressure ceased, and blood started squirting out of my throat, literally.
Mm.
And I was in a recovery room, and I remember this mother was there with her child who had actually had his tonsillectomy, but he was young. And she ran and got people, and by the time they got into me, I was already starting to choke on my, asphyxiate on my blood. And I remember they rushed me down the hallway. And the first time they took me to the hallway, there were posters on the ceiling. I remember seeing them very clearly. But the second time, they were running very fast with me on the gurney. And I remember them taking me into the OR room, strapping me to a table. And I remember I was trying to catch my blood. It's just really strange how human beings do that. But I kept trying to catch my blood. And I started choking again. And the surgeon came up to me, and I saw the anesthesiologist with this paddle with the hole in it. And I'm like, oh, my gosh, I'm in big trouble. This is not good. And then I remember I choked, and I could see the blood on the doctor in front of me. And all of a sudden, I was very angry. I was very upset. And I went from being upset. I wanted to run. I wanted to get away from the OR. It was like flight for life. You just want to run. And then I remember I was sad. And then all of a sudden, I felt this peace, and I saw this light, and I saw a tunnel, and then all of a sudden, I was sitting up on the OR table, and there was a being standing next to me, and he had like a white robe or cloth on, and I could see he was barefoot, and he said to me, that they had chosen me to, they said, you are the chosen one. And it's a common practice of many people with near-death experiences that they tell them that they've been chosen to show them things. And in that moment, he said to me, you may not look upon my face, because I understood that if I did, that I would never return to where I was at that moment. And so he put his arm around me, and I stood off the OR table, and it was really interesting. I could hear all the nurses and doctors and techs. There was a lot of profanity. I remember hearing it, and they were panicking. And I got off the OR table and started to walk towards the wall with him. And he had me stop and look, and I saw my body, and I'm like, wow, there's that body, but it's not me.
Mm-hmm.
And I was really kind of detached from the situation. I was no longer in the body, and we turned and went to step through the OR wall, and all of a sudden we were on like the earth in this valley, and there were these very, very dark purple mountains, and the sky was a purplish color, and there was this red parched soil. And I remember we were walking, and I touched my face, and I could feel my skin, and I'm like, wow, I'm really here. I'm here experiencing this. And we came. He had me look down at our feet as we were walking, and I remember the soil was so parched and dry like flour. It was like poofing around my feet. And then we came to a stream of water. And first he said, notice the soil, for there is no life. And then he said, notice the water, for there is no life. And we walked through the water. And I could see, it was really strange, but for some reason, the aqueducts of Rome were there. And I was like, well, that's strange that this is here, like the fall of the Roman Empire.
Mm-hmm.
And we were walking in the valley, and we came to this tree. And this tree was immense. It was a gigantic tree. And the left-hand side of the tree was charred and burned, and the right-hand side was alive. And on the right-hand side, I could see these balls of energy. They were like gel. And actually, they look a lot like trichomes on marijuana plants. And I didn't realize that until about 2 years ago. But there were these gel-looking like substances full of energy. And I was like, what is this? And he said, for this is the tree of life, and it is dying. We must show you more. So we continued to walk through the valley, and we came to this structure. It was a wall of rubble, and there was an opening, like a doorway in it. And I remember stepping into it with him, and it's like I had entered a tunnel or a stairway going up into this light. And all of a sudden we're standing in this place, and it's all white light everywhere. And he said to me in my ear, he goes, show them, for they are afraid. And I'm like, what is he talking about? He said, show them, for they are afraid. And I looked out amongst the people, and I could see every race, age, sex, size, color. There were all these human beings, and I could just see them forever. And they were looking to my left over my shoulder, and I noticed they like all had this like lost look on their faces. And out of the crowd came this little girl. She came running out, and she grabbed my leg, and I looked down at her, and I'm like, what are you doing here? And it was a surgeon's daughter that I knew, and she was older. And the voice said to me, for she will be 8 when this begins. And in 1985, she turned 8 years old, and she's still alive. Mm-hmm. But something began in 1985, and I don't know what it is. I can tell you that honestly. And all of a sudden, I heard this pounding at like a door, and I was like, oh my gosh, I don't want to look. I was a little, I don't want to say scared, but I was a little nervous about it was big. And I turned to look, and he said, show them, for they are afraid. And there was this door. It was probably one of the biggest doors I've ever seen in my life. It was ancient. It had iron and wood. And beyond the door was a brighter light. And it was streaming through the crevices underneath, in between. It was this bright, bright, white-blue light. It was so bright. And the room I was in was already all white light. And I walked up to the door, and there was a symbol. a symbol, and I knew what it meant. And I can't tell you to this day what it meant because I can't recall that part. But I knew it then, and I put my hand on the door, and the voice said, "For this door is never locked. Whomever wish to enter, all you must do is ask." And I remember thinking, oh, that's like something from Bible school or something. I remember thinking of that Christian aspect. And then the door opened, and I could see forever down below my feet, around where the door was. It's like I was floating in space, like this void. And I remember grabbing, trying to hold on, because I felt like I was going to be sucked in. And I remember peering out, and I could see all these lights. But yet there was one light off in the distance that was so bright. I remember it was burning my eyes, and so I put my hand over my eyes, and I'm trying to look. And then instantaneously, all of a sudden, at my feet is this giant sphere of light. And it's rising up in front of me. And I'm looking at this light thinking, oh my God, I am not imagining this, because it was so beautiful. It had this like a furry light coming out of it, like a static energy, but it was soft and beautiful. And inside the light, I saw other lights shaped somewhat like paisleys, I guess, or like drops of water, but they were all these beautiful pastel lights swimming around in this big light. And I could hear this like a music, like crystals, like snowflakes would make. And I was hearing this music. And as I'm looking at it, it's so bright, I'm putting my hand over my eyes, trying to look into it. And as I'm peering, looking at it, all of a sudden, this white light hand stretches through the membrane of the light and reaches out to me. And I remember looking at it thinking, oh my God, it's perfection. It wasn't a man, it wasn't a woman's hand. It was this perfect hand reaching out, and I knew I had to touch it. And I reached out to touch it, and the moment it touched my finger, I just knew things. I didn't have to think. I knew that this is where we all come from, this place, we originate from this place, and that we've all forgotten. And I felt this overwhelming, powerful love that was so intense. Actually how I've referred to it to people, I said, you could have 1 trillion orgasms and you would never experience what I felt in that moment. And as it touched me, it pulled me into the light. And I was flying, and they said, we must show you things to come. And we were flying through like these holographic images. And I could see tsunamis, tidal waves, earthquakes. I saw these buildings collapsing, 2 buildings, and there was blood, like in the mist. And I got it on my face. I remember there was blood in the air. And there were people living by the ocean, and they said, for they are like lemmings to the sea, that they have chosen to live there. It's their conscious decision. And I actually saw many very, very disturbing things, and I'm like, look, I don't want to see anymore. I don't want to see this. I can't take it anymore. And they said, okay, well, you're going to go back, and you're going to share this experience with others. I said, no, I'm not going back. And I remember I was crying. I said, I'm not going back. I want to stay here. I don't want to go back. And they said, no. They were actually very firm about it. They said, you are going back. And they said, but there is something we must share with you. And they went on to say, this is what they said. They said, there will be a time, there is neither night nor day, and death shall no longer walk the earth, though a man shall wish it so, for he must face the coming judgment. And I was like, oh boy, I don't know if I like this. It was the whole Armageddon thing I was thinking in my mind. I'm like, this is pretty rough stuff.
Right.
But then they said, Dawn, you must make this choice as others must make this same choice for God, for God knows what lies within your heart, as you know, for that's what matters, what's within your heart. That there will be a moment when all of our hearts will be looked into. And I remember, I'll never forget those moments of them sharing this with me. And then they said, okay, you're going back. It was just very quick. They were very, I had no choice. I had to come back. And I woke up. It was the next day. The sun was rising over the desert in Tucson, Arizona. Some people I knew came in who actually had worked in the OR, and they said, you need to get a lawyer. There were some things that happened, and I couldn't talk. My tongue was distended and swollen. Actually, I couldn't walk for about a week. They bathed me and took care of me. And I said, no. It's a new day. But, I have to be truthful with you. I did not remember everything that happened to me at that point. It came back to me about a week later when I was actually sleeping and getting better. It just hit me like a brick wall, and I relived the whole experience. And I did end up going to see a doctor when I eventually got stationed overseas, because I was still having all these strange dreams of these beings coming to me, and they would sing about love, that God is love and love is God, and it was over and over again. And I sought out the help of a psychiatrist, and I said, you got to give me some drugs. I got to stop this. I can't take it anymore. And then he said, no, I'm going to give you books. And he said, I studied religions of the world before I became a psychiatrist, and you need to read these books. And so it actually helped me give me some understanding of what I was experiencing. I was a 19-year-old kid, and I was having these things happening.
Right. Okay, I want to reserve the second hour here for the prophetic visions that you had, but I want to mention here one thing. Based upon the visions that you had seen, you mentioned that you had seen a great future for humanity, but that we would have to go through some tribulations affecting us all. And in order to go through, quote, the eye of a needle, unquote, that we'd have to unload the baggage that we're attached to. Is it your understanding that we're in the midst of these tribulations based upon what's happening all around us, Don? You have the chemtrails in the skies dumping these cancer-causing chemicals in the air. You have the radiation fallout from Fukushima that will be with us for many generations. As far as I'm concerned, the Pacific Ocean is toast. It's dead. The ocean life is highly radioactive. And then you have the weather warfare caused by HAARP. So I'm thinking to myself that perhaps we are in these final stages, but based upon what I've heard, your visions almost sound as if a cleansing needs to take place before the new earth appears on the horizon. Is that correct? Would that be correct in my assessment here?
Well, what I see is our greatest adversaries, whether they are people or circumstances, are our greatest teachers. And, of course, I've learned that on a personal level, but I'm starting to see it on a global level. And that in order for us to come up with solutions, we, as human beings, because of the way we understand things, are creating these situations so we can grow and come up with the next solution or the next change. And I do believe this is all happening, and I do believe it is not a time to live in fear, but to look for solutions. And that is kind of one thing I would also like to talk about in a little bit, or some of the things I've dreamt about that I see coming, and how we as human beings are going to change the way we live and coexist on the earth with other living beings. And speaking of the earth also, I do see that there are changes, and I have been told that once we choose to make these changes, that there will be assistance for us, the human race and the earth, and that there will be beings that are are here but are going to become known to help teach us.
Mm-hmm.
But we have to shift as a whole, and we have to start somewhere, whether it's locally or individually. We have to start shifting the way we live.
Okay. Now, it's obvious, based upon what I've heard from you, that you had your cross to bear, so to speak. So, how important is it to live in the present, to live in the now, Don?
Well, yeah, that's pretty interesting because
Mm-hmm.
the reason I started feeling free to talk about this
Mm-hmm.
is when I remember one day I woke up and there were all these golden beings walking around the house. There were a lot of them, and they were all identical beings, and they were all walking through the flower of life. And then I came to this understanding that all of us human beings are these golden beings.
Right.
And then I was able to see through people that not only are we these golden beings, but the deeper we go, the greater our potential.
Mm-hmm.
And as I was shown, there is a place, I call it the void, or the potential, or the field, that the more present we become as human beings, the greater our potential becomes, because the greater our connection to the void, where there is nothing, but yet everything exists.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I would refer to as an aspect of clarity. So the more present we all become, the more powerful we become. And as in powerful, I mean that we can manifest a change, that we're the ones that we're waiting for. We are the ones that need to wake up, that we have this potential within us, the more present we become, to where we can bring this change, that we can manifest these new ways of living, cleaner ways of living, and a clarity. And I've also been shown that in another vision I had, that is what's coming, where you talked about the now. I was told by these beings that the next lesson for humans to learn is called clarity of thought with non-judgment.
Mm-hmm.
That we will all reach a point to where we know what everyone is thinking. And once we reach that point, it will become a moot point, because we will realize we're all the same, that none of us are different. But yet we must also approach each other with non-judgment, which is also what I would probably say is compassion or love, a very high level of love, the non-judgment. And then we will start to see greater shifts among humans in consciousness.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But being present is most likely the most important thing for any of us to do right now, because being in the now is being in your power as the being that you are. That we, as things become more difficult, the more important it will be to be in the present, so we can work through all this and overcome it.
It's a powerful word.
I really, really believe this is very important.
Mm-hmm.
We cannot live in fear. We need to let go of the fear. And I have seen lately that there is a percentage of the population, people who are having a lot of psychological and emotional issues right now. And, it's probably around 25, 26% of the population, because they are basing their decisions within themselves on fear. And the fear is getting in the way, and it's causing a lot of issues, a lot of turmoil for all of us. But my greater understanding is that because we are all one and connected, we still need people to move forward. It's like a drop of water. a drop of water. Something has to start happening, and then inevitably the rest will follow. But it has to start happening somewhere. And many people are afraid to move forward because they don't want to leave people behind, or they don't, it's a perception, because no one's left behind. We are all one. Mm-hmm. It's the way we perceive things. So people need to stand up, and people need to start changing the way they live, but actively doing so. So we can have these solutions, mm-hmm. so we can let go of the fear. There's fear everywhere.
Right. Okay.
People eat it daily.
True. It's a very powerful statement. Okay, well, we are approaching the end here of the first hour, Don. Would you care to remind to the listening audience of your website and how anyone can reach you should they be interested in contacting you or perhaps ordering your products?
It's www.bluewateralchemy.com. Mm-hmm. And there is an About Us page and a Contact Us page on the website. And we have links to research all around the world. That's the place to go, is bluewateralchemy.com.
Okay, great. Well, I appreciate you taking the time here to chat with me for the first hour, and I'll see you again for the second hour.
Okay, thank you, Martin.
Thanks, Don. Mm-hmm. Take care.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Bye-bye.
Bye.
That's it for the first hour on As Above, So Below Radio. Tune in for the second hour by purchasing a membership, and all for as little as $6.95 per month. Just log on to holisticadvocate.com and click on the subscribe button. In the second hour of this interview, Don shares his visions concerning geophysical disturbances involving major earthquakes. The 2004 tsunami in Indonesia, was this event artificially created? Will there be a change in the dynamics of our sun? Are there celestial bodies that could impact the planet in the foreseeable future? And is there a planet hidden behind our sun inhabited with beings that remain poised to interfere with the Earth? This and much more. You're listening to As Above, So Below Radio.